Okay, so I want to go over just briefly some details of the Trayvon Martin George Zimmerman case. Um, George Zimmerman was acquitted in 2013, and I know when I talked to my students about this, a lot of them were very young at the time, so they didn't necessarily know the details. So I'm going to give you just a brief outline. Um, Trayvon Martin was 17 years old. He was a Miami high school student visiting his father in Sanford, Florida. Dressed in a hooded sweatshirt, the teen was on his way back home to the home of his father's fiance after buying a bag of Skittles and a bottle of juice when he was spotted by Zimmerman, a 28-year-old insurance fraud investigator who was captain of the neighborhood patrol at the retreat at Twin Lakes. Zimmerman called the non-emergency line of the Sanford police to report that Martin looked suspicious, but then he ignored the police dispatcher's advice not to follow the young man. Moments later, gunfire rang out. When officers arrived, Martin was dead at the scene. Zimmerman, who had a bloody nose and cuts on the back of his head, was questioned, then released. There were no eyewitnesses to the shooting, and the police chose not to arrest Zimmerman, who claimed to have acted in self-defense. It wasn't until after Martin's parents raised concerns about the police investigation into the death of their son that the case gained national attention. Protest rallies were held in cities nationwide. Um, Many people demanded justice for Martin, who many believe Zimmerman had profiled as suspicious and threatening simply because the teen was Black. On April 11, 2012, following weeks of demonstration, a special prosecutor appointed by Florida's governor charged Zimmerman with second-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty, and the case went to trial in June 2013. In court, the prosecution portrayed Zimmerman as a wannabe cop who had profiled Martin as a criminal, chased him down, and fought him. Prosecutors also tried to poke holes in Zimmerman's self-defense claim by pointing to inconsistencies in his statements to the police. Defense attorneys for Zimmerman, who did not take the stand, contended he only shot Martin after the teen attacked him. On July 13th, after deliberating for 16 hours over 2 days, a jury of 6 women found Zimmerman not guilty. Outraged and hurting Black people went to social media to grieve this senseless murder and the accompanying lack of justice. Patrisse Cullors visited Alicia Garza's page, where Garza had written a love note to Black people, stating, quote, "We don't deserve to be killed with impunity. We need to love ourselves and fight for a world where Black lives matter. Black people, I love you. I love us. We matter. Our lives matter." In a matter of moments, fellow community organizer Patrisse Cullors created the social media hashtag Black Lives Matter, and Opal Tometi created the website and social media platforms that soon connected people across the country. Black Lives Matter was born, and the hashtag Black Lives Matter started spreading like wildfire. A year later, it went viral during the 2014 uprising in Ferguson, Missouri, when Black people took to the streets with a simple demand: stop killing us. Oh. So what you see on the screen here is a little bit of history directly from the Black Lives Matter page. It goes over the origins in 2013 after the murder of Trayvon Martin and the acquittal of George Zimmerman. What I find particularly powerful about this statement is the second bullet here. Black Lives Matter is an ideological and political intervention in a world where Black lives are systemically and intentionally targeted for demise. It is an affirmation of Black folks' humanity, our contributions to the society, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression. These are the founders of Black Lives Matter. Like I said, it was founded by three women, two of which identify as queer, Eliza Garza and Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, a Nigerian American. All three are rooted in intersectional Black feminist traditions and activism. Intersectionality looks at systems of oppression as interlocking. In the words of intersectionality founder Kimberly Crenshaw, quote, intersectionality is simply a prism to see the interactive effects of various forms of discrimination and disempowerment. It looks at the way that racism, many times, interacts with patriarchy, heterosexism, classism, xenophobia, seeing that the overlapping vulnerabilities created by these systems actually create specific kinds of challenges. Intersectionality has been used in the past to critique liberation movements which focus on a single axis of oppression, such as just race or just gender or just sexuality. As Garza, Cullors, and Tometi assert on the Black Lives Matter website, Black liberation movements in this country have created room, space, and leadership mostly for Black heterosexual cisgender men, leaving women, queer, and transgender people and others either out of the movement or in the background to move the work forward with little or no recognition. As a network, we have always recognized the need to center the leadership of women, queer, and trans people. And so I highlight this to highlight how this kind of goes against the narrative that we generally hear about Black Lives Matter as being a very male dominated and male focused, specifically cis male dominated and cis male focused movement. I will give you an example. I was asked to speak on a panel to a bunch of lawyers. I kind of got roped into it. I didn't really want to. So I got roped into this panel to speak to some lawyers about the Black Lives Matter movement. And I was in a group with other lawyers, all heterosexual. I was the token queer. And as we were kind of planning what we were going to do on this panel and what we were going to talk about, I highlighted the fact that the Black Lives Matter movement was women and queer led, and at heart an intersectional movement that says not only do Black men's lives matter, but Black women's lives matter, Black trans folks' lives matter, Black sex workers matter, Black immigrants matter, etc. Black incarcerated folks matter, etc. And the lawyers that were on the panel were kind of flabbergasted because even though they were asked to speak about Black Lives Matter, they had very little knowledge of its queer and feminist origins. They really were focusing in on it as a very kind of male, cis, heterosexual movement. The call out to Black liberation movements for centering mostly Black heterosexual cisgender men while silencing and marginalizing women, queers, and trans people echoes the call out Kimberly Crenshaw, the founder of intersectionality, makes in her founding piece. She says, quote, if any real efforts are to be made to free Black people of the constraints and conditions that characterize racial subordination, then theories and strategies purporting to reflect the Black community's needs must include an analysis of sexism and patriarchy. Similarly, Feminism must include an analysis of race if it hopes to express the aspirations of non-white women. Neither Black liberationist politics nor feminist theory can ignore the intersectional experiences of those whom the movement claim as their respective constituents. Here, focusing on Black liberation and feminist movements, Crenshaw confronts those movements for their narrow focus on the most privileged constituents. Black liberation for focusing on the needs and leadership of Black men without an analysis of how sexism and patriarchy affect Black women, both within and outside of the movement. Likewise, Crenshaw repudiates feminist movements for emphasizing the needs and leadership of white women without an analysis of racism. As a result of their lack of intersectional analysis, both movements, Black liberation and normative feminism, fail Black women. So I'm going to kind of go back into time a little bit in talking again about intersectionality and where this came from. Intersectionality comes from Black feminist traditions as early as the early 20th century. As early as 1892, in response to Martin Delany proclaiming that, quote, when he entered the Council of Kings, the Black race entered with him. In other words, he was saying his achievements were achievements for the entire Black race. Anna Julia Cooper, sometimes known as the mother of Black feminism, famously proclaimed, only the Black woman can say when and where I enter, in the quiet, undisputed dignity of my womanhood, without violence and without suing or special patronage. Then and there, the whole Negro race enters with me. This oft-repeated quote points to the sexism within Black male leadership and the need to center the margins for the liberation of all Black people. And like I said, this was 1892. So this was at the beginnings of the suffrage movement, at the end of the anti-slavery abolitionist movement. We see kind of what's often kind of called a proto-feminist movements happening amongst Black and white women. A lot of the recognition for these proto-feminist movements have gone to white women. However, Black women were also on the front lines fighting for rights, fighting against patriarchy, and recognizing the roles of racism and sexism in the lives of Black women. Now I'm going to get to this picture right here that's on the screen. Perhaps the strongest tie between intersectional theory, Black feminism, and Black Lives Matter comes from the 1977 Combahee River Collective statement. A collective of Black feminists and Black lesbian feminists, the Combahee River Collective were a group of writers, activists, and organizers who started meeting in 1974. In 1977, they released their statement, which has become a hallmark of Black feminism, and I believe directly influences the Black Lives Matter movement. The statement opens with a direct articulation of the collective's politics and goals. And they say, quote, the most general statement of our politics at the present time would be that we are actively committed to struggling against the racial, sexual, heterosexual, and class oppression, and see as our particular task the development of integrated analysis and practice based upon the facts that major systems of oppression are interlocking. The synthesis of these oppressions creates the conditions of our lives. Later in the statement, in their own declaration of Black Lives Matter, the collective states, above all, our politics initially sprang from the shared belief that Black women are inherently valuable, that our liberation is a necessity, not as an adjunct to someone else's, but because of our need as human persons for autonomy. So thus far, I've described the queer and feminist foundations of BLM through the identities and words of the founders, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opa Tometi. I, I then went to describe their work as part of a lineage of intersectional Black feminist theory. I now want to turn to an issue that explicitly ties Black Lives Matter to the early gay liberation movements. That is the issue of police brutality.